You're listening to the Fun Never Ends podcast with Metalhead Nelson.
Hey, welcome to the Fun Never Ends podcast. I'm your Metalhead Nelson, and with me is Brutal Brett. Brutal Brett, how you doing, man?
I'm doing very well again. I'd like to once again welcome another very special guest, an icon, a legend, you can say, in the hard rock and the metal scene.
Yes, he's the amazing Timothy Gaines, who was the original bass player of the band Stryper. Also, he was a bass player for the band Aldo Nova. Timothy Gaines. Tim, how you
Hey
doing?
guys, how's it going, everyone? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. How have you been? What have you been doing these days?
Well, I'm getting slowly back into playing and recording, and I've been away from music for about almost 2 years now, but I'm slowly getting back into it again.
It's good to hear, man.
Very
Yeah.
much so. I see a few or basses and guitars behind you. Are you more of a P bass or a jazz bass? What's your go-to play style?
The answer is yes. I am. I mostly use piano jazz on recordings, but I love playing live. I love playing a jazz bass, and I'm also a Stingray guy, so that's been probably my main go-to instrument for the last, I don't know, 40. What year is this? 2020. Well, since around 1979, 1980, I've been playing Stingrays. And of course, I've had a bunch of others in between during the Stryper days, But yeah, mainly a piano jazz for recording, and live, I love playing a jazz bass.
You still own your Overture bass that you had?
Yeah, I've got. So he built me. Justin at Overture built me 1, 2, 3 custom basses. 2 were striperized, with the yellow and black, and another one was it's all exotic woods. It's a really nice bass, and yeah, so I have that, and the other 2 I has been in the holdings of a collector who owns several of my old basses, including an old Spectre bass that I owned, and Status Graphite, and so they're in good hands at the moment. And if I ever need to get them back to play a Stryper show, which I doubt will ever happen, but they're available there for me to get a hold of. So. But yeah, I still have my original Stryper bass, which was a 78 Music Man Stingray, which I bought when I was a kid. I think I paid $425 or $450 for it. It came with 2 cases, a hard shell case and a Music Man gig bag, and it still has all the case candy, T-shirt and the original strings and hang tags and all that stuff. So that was my first Stryper bass, was a Music Man Stingray, and it was originally white and had a maple neck, and we couldn't afford custom paint jobs at the time. So what had happened was Robert Sweet, the drummer, took yellow and black electrical tape, which was like the wide 2-inch tape, and he wrapped it around the base and made different patterns and made a Stryper pattern. And then he covered it with marine lacquer, which was kind of like a rubberized varnish. And what ended up happening, it looked great, but it sounded terrible because all the resonance had gone out of the instrument because it was coated in plastic and rubber. So I played that for the first year or 2 years, and I did the first Stryper album with that, and I ended up getting an endorsement in '85 with Aria Pro, so I ended up going with Aria Pro at the time, and I retired my Stingray. Eventually I took all the yellow and black tape off of it, and it's now again like an off-white, but it's gosh, how old is that thing now? 78. So I don't know, it's 40 something years old now. So 42, 43 years old. But it's still my number one bass that I go to when I'm doing something, either recording. I did my solo album with that album or with that bass, and I did, gosh, tons of recordings with it. But then I also play the Fender Jazz and Fender P bass, and anything by Leo Fender has been my, I guess now my passion. In fact, you can see behind me, I've got guitar. So I lost the last 3 years. I've ended up playing guitar. And that's kind of why I've been away from music. Just decided I wanted to pick up guitar right around the time COVID, if I can say that. When COVID started, I decided one night I was going to buy a guitar. So I ended up buying a Squier Telecaster. And from there, I ended up I customized the guitar, put new pickups and did fretwork and new pickups and new fretwork. Basically made it a nice guitar, a new bridge and the whole thing. But I was into twang guitar and country music. And so I was pairing that up with a Music Man, an HD, what was it? An HD 50 amp. It was a clean amp. It wasn't a dirty amp at all. And kind of getting used to playing country music and scales and just, and I'm a bass player. I played guitar originally as a kid, and then I went to bass at about 13, 14 years old. And so coming back to guitar was a lot of fun. And it just, since I wasn't doing a lot at the last few years, I decided to just go with guitar. And from there I got a Les Paul, and then got a Les Paul Jr., got a jazz guitar, and now I've got Strats, and I think the Fender Strat is my favorite guitar so far that I have, and I've been getting a few of those now. So Fender Strats, I've been playing guitar. I'm not really a great guitar player, but I can hold my own, and not a metal player in that sense, more of a blues player, and I play acoustic guitar fairly well, enough to hold my own also. So at any rate, I'm doing that. And like I said, just recently in the last month or so, I've gotten back into playing bass again. So I'm trying to get my chops back up with that, and getting my recording rig going, and we'll see where it goes with that.
This sounds good. Go ahead, Brett.
You answered a few questions I was going to ask next, such as, did you get any aftermarket pickups or fretboards on it? And even talk about switching back and forth between guitar and bass. So I guess I would just ask, does your guitar playing style match your bass playing style in regards to whether you said that you're more bluesy when it comes to guitar, and does it match the same with how you approach bass now as well? Has it upgraded your play style?
I think I can't really consider myself a heavy metal bass player. That's kind of where we ended up with Stryper in that genre. But I grew up playing jazz, family of jazz musicians. So I had that. Of course, as a kid, you get into the rock bands, that I grew up with, and pop radio at the time, AM radio was, so you had the Motown and the soul music, and then a lot of the bubblegum music that we would consider today pretty tasteless music. But I always had great bass playing. And when I first started off in bass, I was really gravitating towards the rhythm section of Elton John's band, and that bass player was Dee Murray. And I just kind of felt the bass, and that's where I ended up going. And so that was around 13 years old. And my mother, because both my parents saw that I was showing a lot of interest in playing bass, so they got me my first bass when I was 14 for my 14th birthday. But I've always had guitars in the background, and the style of music is, that I've enjoyed has always been more of a blues type of music, not so much heavy metal. As far as bass playing goes, there's a lot of great metal bass guitar players and bass players, of course, too. But when it comes to playing bass, I always enjoyed more of a bluesy or a jazz type of music. And it's just more enjoyable for me as a player to play that style of music than metal, where I'm just holding down basically what the guitar player's doing on the low end. So some water here.
So I want to talk about how you originally got the gig for Stryper, and if you can talk about your Stormer days.
Yeah, so let me go with Stormer first. I was still in high school. I was my last year in high school when I was playing in a band called White Lace, which was a cover band. We played Gazaris, in Hollywood, and played backyard parties and stuff. And Stormer was this big band in LA, throughout the 70s. And, they always did shows with Van Halen and a lot of the bands that we come to know that are huge today. So it was always like, I'd go see them as a kid, I'd be 14, 15 years old, and I'd be sneaking into clubs that I wasn't old enough to be into, but I'd hang out at the back door or whatever. And sometimes I'd get in, but so Stormer was one of those bands that I really looked up to. And the bass player, Jeremy Masana, he was just a smoking bass player. So I was always like gravitated towards him as a bass player. And Stormer used to hire other bands to play their parties. So they'd throw a big party or a big bash, and they'd hire other bands. And they just happened, our bands, White Lace was one of the bands that they hired to play at their bash. And so that's how they, I guess, got to know me or saw me. And when Jeremy had left Stormer, they asked me if I would be interested. And of course I was interested. It was like a big deal. And I had learned everything. They gave me demo tapes and songs that were just recorded on cassette. And I learned everything like within a week or so. And I was just like ready for rehearsal. And the very first show we played, or one of the first shows we had played, we had gone through all the songs that we had rehearsed that I knew. And we still had a lot of extra time to go. And so they asked me, do you know any of our other songs? And I said, of course I do. So we continued playing the show, and I played all these other songs that I had never played before. But, it was just one of those things where you're a kid, and, I was 18 years old. I still, like I said, I was still in school, high school, and joined the band. And, after I got out of high school, it was like for the next couple of years, that was like the thing, to be in Hollywood and to just play all these big shows. And so Stormer ended up getting a record deal with some indie label out of Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. And they took us into the studio, and we did we recorded a whole album. Plus we did a Christmas single, a 45. And the 45 came out, and it was distributed to, what the idea was, we were going to distribute this Christmas single at Christmas time. And this was in 81 or 2. I can't remember now. 81. And distribute this 45 to all the radio stations across the country, so introduced Stormer to the radio stations through this Christmas song or Christmas songs, and then released the album early that spring, and we just hopefully get picked up and in rotation or whatever. Long story short, the record company ran out of money, and we lost our label in that sense. And so the only thing that ever got released was this 45, and it's still out there. If you sometimes you'll see them on eBay, but there's still a few people that have these 45s with these songs that we recorded. So somewhere there's an album recorded that was never mixed with Stormer, and that was it. So when a couple of years had gone by, you have the band inner struggles, and things just weren't working out. We're firing band members, and it got to the point where it was just me, the guitar player, and the singer, and we got this new drummer in the band, and just things weren't feeling right. And at that point, I was just not feeling right about the life I was living, and because I was partying pretty heavy, I was into coke and just the girls and all that stuff. It was just what for me and my beliefs as a Christian, it just wasn't syncing up. And so I left Stormer, and that would have been sometime in the late part of '82, and I just kind of devoted my life at that point to God, and started getting involved with church. And there was a flyer or something. Remember, was it Bam Magazine or LA Weekly? One of those
Probably Weekly.
magazines that came out in Hollywood and LA. They had a big picture of Stormer, and they had a new bass player. Joe Marks was in the band, who was in Rock Candy and part of Vince Neil's thing. And so they saw that the guys in Stryper were looking, or Rock's Regime at the time, were looking for a bass player and to start this Christian band. And the band at the time was Rock's Regime. And then we changed our name to Stryper later. But so they were looking for somebody to join this band. They'd all become Christians, and saw that I wasn't in the band Stormer anymore by that Bam Magazine picture. So they called the number, and they talked to the singer of Stormer, and he said that I'd become a Jesus freak or something. And so anyways, that was like confirmation for them that I should be in the band. And so they called me up, and long story short, again, I ended up joining the band. I met the guys the next day, and we all knew each other from playing Gazaris and stuff, but I never really thought that I would be in a band with these guys. So through Stormer, and this picture after I was out of the band that didn't have, I wasn't in the picture anymore. The guys in Stryper, Robert and Michaels, especially, that's how they got a hold of me. And so I joined Rock's Regime at the time, and then shortly thereafter we changed our name to Stryper. But a funny story also is, I remember when I left Stormer, I went to the Troubadour one night. I think my brother Steve was playing, and Oz Fox came up to me up in the balcony area at the Troubadour, and he gave me a napkin with his number on it, and he said, "Hey, I'm in a band." Oz, he's kind of funny. He's like, "I'm in the band," and he gave me his number. Well, we want a bass player, and so he gave me the number. I'm like, I'm not looking to get in a band right now, dude. So whatever, And then it was like months later that they contacted me, and of course, when I went down to meet everyone, it was Oz. So yeah, so the beginning of Stryper was kind of a really cool experience, and things just once we started playing out, things just kind of took off from there.
That's awesome.
So
I have a question about, was the band, in the fact of being a Christian band, was it taken to very easily in the rock community back then? Because now I know Christian rock bands, it's even within, I'm more of the death metal guy, to where Nelson is more of the hair metal, power metal, and there's a whole subsection of just Christian music in which even my youth growing up has had a huge impact on me. So I'm just wondering how it was seen back in the early 80s, mid 80s even.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so it wasn't really, there was a few other bands close to us at that time. This would have been 80. Well, I joined the band in 83. And so 83, early 84, I think there was Bloodgood. from
I got to see this.
Pacific Northwest, and then there was Barren Cross, I think, was another band in LA, and then there's a few others that they were starting to spring up about the same time that we hit the scene. So we were so the answer was no at first. I mean, they were pairing us with bands like Anthrax and Raven, and people hated us. I mean, they were spitting on us and being in that realm. But early on when we started, we didn't even play out for a while. We did our first show in February of '84, and at that point, we had been inviting people to our. We would have rehearsals in the garage at the Sweets house, so that was like our rehearsal studio. And on Thursday nights, we'd have a Bible study, and then we'd have a friend of ours, Michael Guido, would get up and speak, and we'd play some music, and then he'd get up and speak, and then it's like kids were like getting saved at our Bible studies, and then they'd invite more kids, and it got to the point within a few months that there wasn't enough room in our garage for all these people to hang out. And so they were hanging out on the back or on the front lawn and in the driveway and just kind of listening through the door. So anyways, at this point, before we had even played our first show, we had this huge following of kids that were just coming to our rehearsals. And so we did our first show in Orange County. I can't remember the name of the club, but when we played, the place was packed out, and then we opened for some band, and I can't remember who it was now, but I remember people were like mocking us, saying we were a joke, and the other band was kind of saying we were a joke. And but we played, and as soon as we got done playing, all of our fans that were with us, they left, and the building was pretty much empty. So we had all this fan base, and they were laughing at us, or not the fans, but the other band was laughing at us. And then we played, and then we left, and the place was empty. But it just kind of took off from there in Hollywood, and it's the same type of thing. It was like we were just more and more kids were showing up to the shows, and we were throwing out Bibles and stuff. And so in LA, we were kind of a joke to the people, the scene, but yet there was a ton of people that were coming to the shows. And got to the point where we did the Troubadour. One of the other things that we started doing early on was promoting our own shows rather than because you had to do that pay to play thing, and it was really stupid in LA. So we'd always have to sell tickets, and it was kind of like, we're not making any money. We're making the club money, but nobody's paying us. So we started promoting our own shows, and we'd rent out the club, or we'd rent out like Anaheim Convention Center or whatever. And we'd promote our own shows, and, we'd get the money back, and we'd sell merchandise and do the whole thing. So anyways, we did one of these things at the Troubadour, and we ended up selling so many tickets that we had to do 2 shows in the same night. So, and I remember there was lines going out, at the Troubadour, going around the side of the building, and, it was crazy. And it took off pretty quick. There was a guy from Japan. What's his name? Can't think of the guy's name. He was a DJ, a heavy metal guy from Japan, and he came over, and he was looking at BAM magazine. We were also doing our own ads in BAM magazine, like full page ads. And he saw this picture of Stryper, and we had just released the Yellow and Black Attack, the EP, and we were in the studio at this time doing Soldiers, I think. And he saw this big display in BAM magazine, with the picture of Stryper and the yellow and black, and they all look like, girls with the long hair. But he thought it was cool, and he took it to Japan, and he started talking to promoters, and so they ended up bringing us over in 1985 for the first time, along with so the rival promoter was bringing Joan Jett and Motley over for the first time. So there's the 3 bands, Stryper, Joan Jett, and Motley Crue, all in Tokyo playing like one night after each other, and we're all like, us and Joan Jett were in the same hotel, and Motley were in the hotel next to us, and so we're all in Japan for the first time. I think Joan Jett had been there before, but at any rate, it was just one of those experiences. We weren't even really, out on the road at that point. I mean, I think we had played some shows, but nothing like, nothing like a big tour or anything like that. We did some shows around, California and Portland, Oregon, and, the Southwest, I should say, but nothing like a big, extensive tour. And, it just took off, from Japan. Everything just kind of got really big. We did that Live in Japan video. We did a video for Soldiers Under Command that got some airplay. I don't know if it got on MTV yet, but, from Soldiers, things just started to progress. We were playing theaters at that point and large clubs. And then when To Hell with the Devil came out, we were still playing theaters and clubs, but it was the song Honestly that put us like into the arenas.
Yeah.
So you'd think, here we are, we're playing metal, and, we have this girly ballad that comes out, and that's the one that ends up in the top 40 on radio. And that's what took us. I mean, it was almost overnight at that point. We were playing theaters, and then it's like all of a sudden we're playing and selling out like 15,000 seat arenas, and we were doing great in merch, and everything took off from there.
What did you enjoy most about like touring and of course going overseas and comparing? I wanted to see if you can compare European audiences, Japanese audiences, and of course everybody along with the US. How do the differences between them?
Yeah, so, well, like I said, Japan was kind of a trip because, when we got there, I mean, we were still pretty much nobodies, just playing in LA. We got to Japan, and, I went through customs, and they have these big doors that you can't see through, and you open the doors, and then you walk out, and, you go get your, luggage. No, not your luggage, but you just go and meet your ride or whatever. I didn't know what to expect. I think I was the first one to come out of the building after you go through customs. And so I went through customs and went through these big metal doors, and everybody starts screaming. There's like hundreds, maybe 1,000 people there. I mean, it was a lot of people, a lot of screaming girls. And I wasn't expecting any. At first I didn't know, who they're screaming at. It was just kind of like, I go through these doors, and all of a sudden everybody's like really loud screaming. And immediately they're coming up and wanting autographs and handing you gifts. And so it was like, wow, it's like, what a trip to go somewhere. I wasn't expecting anything. And you're like in a foreign country. It's like different, and you're jet lagged. And it's just, my head was spinning at that point. But, so we go from that, and then we play our shows, and it's like everybody, the audience is very reserved during your shows. And it's like they politely clap afterwards. And it was kind of a trip. I think they're a little more crazy now than they were back in the 80s. But so it was definitely culture shock, and it was a wonderful experience. I still have gifts that I've kept in boxes and that I've collected from that first time in Japan in 85. And of course, going back several times since then, it's always been great. But then, going to Europe, it's like hardcore metal guys, and we did some shows. We did a metal fest right around that same time. And again, it was like we were the joke. And anytime we got paired up with these hardcore metal bands, like Testament, or, like I said, Anthrax, or any of these bands, it kind of like was, it wasn't the right fit. We were kind of the glam thing, and the hair metal, if you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. So it's like we're playing these shows, and again, people are like throwing stuff at you and booing. And I remember it was freezing cold. It's kind of raining, and people are throwing chains, like big chains at a duck. and like eggs at you. They're throwing eggs and just food and just booing. And we held our. So that's when we first walked out, and then by the time we finished the set, everybody was like going crazy. So it was like we had to win these guys over. Yeah. And that's how it's like that over in Europe. The guys are. It's just those guys are hardcore, and and since then we've gone over. When we went over, it was we had our fan base after that point, and so you always knew what to expect from then on. And then we never did South America until I was actually out of the band when they went the first time, and I don't remember 2009 or 8 or something around there. I got back in the band in 2009, so it would have been before then. But my point being is that it's the same kind of a thing. It's like the only time I've been into a Latin American type of concert would have been every time we played Puerto Rico, it was like we were selling out 20,000 seat baseball stadiums, and the people were just insane. So that was my only taste of like the Latin American style audience until we went in 2012, I think 11 or 12. We went to did Brazil and Argentina, and so we did South America, Chile, and it was awesome. It was awesome. And one of the places we went when we got to South America, we stayed at in Bolivia, and the place we rehearsed at was this former communist guy's and what was his name? Che
Guevara?
Yeah. It was his former house that he, and so it turned out to be a that where his house was, or where he lived at, whenever, I don't know his history, but they had turned this place into a studio, like a place where bands could rehearse. So we stayed there, or we rehearsed there for our tour, our South American tour, which was kind of cool. And I remember being in Bolivia, in La Paz, and just, you're so high up, you're sick from the altitude. And it was awesome though. And what an experience. The food, it's like everybody in South America is like really big on steak. It's like Brazil and Argentina is like, man, you just got a lot of beef. So a lot of good food and good people, and we went over and just on radical audiences. I mean, they're crazy as can be.
Go ahead, Britt.
It sounds like from the beginning, Stryper was a very do-it-yourself type of mentality. I see and heard a lot of parallels. I read Henry Rollins' Get in the Van, and the story that you just gave kind of parallels that exactly, where they were spitting on him, throwing things, and the idea of having to win them over.
Yeah.
At what point was there, or I know that it was after you said you came back from Japan, but was there a certain point where people started reaching out to the band more and more versus you having to take that DIY approach, or was it always even up until the early aughts of the 2000s, still very much do it yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've always done everything ourselves, but I mean, we've always headlined our shows, and we've always had bands open rather than us be the opener for somebody else. And like I said, we always did our merch. We always did well in merchandise, but we just had an audience that, the fan base was, I don't want to say, I'd say now are predominantly Christian, but during the 80s, we were just another one of those bands on MTV, and that countdown, and the just that presence, being on TV, on MTV all the time, and kids at that point, I keep saying kids because we were all kids back then, but
It makes
I'm not, I just turned 61, so I'm like, everyone's a kid
You're
to me.
still a kid.
Yeah, everyone's
You're
a kid
still
to
a
me
kid.
though. But my point is, so people that were, say, 10 years younger than me, that were still in junior high and high school were going home from school and watching, Dial MTV and the countdown, and they'd call in and request the videos, and it was one of those times that it won't be recreated again because everything has changed so much, and especially with the advent of computers and just our cell phones, where everybody's so involved with a cell phone now, and your head's always down or on a computer or whatever. It's like there's nothing that's going to compare to like how that impact that MTV had in the 80s. And but yeah, the audiences were awesome. In the beginning we had to win people over, but as things neared the 90s, it's like we had a huge fan base, and and then the 90s came and everything kind of dwindled away for a while, but and the guys are still going strong. Here we are, what is it, end of 2023, and they're still making albums, and they're still out there touring, and they're still a fan base, all these years later.
Yeah, I remember I caught you guys for the first time. I think it was House of Blues, Anaheim. This was probably one of the NAMM shows. I think you guys got
Oh yeah,
Chris Jericho come out and sing
right.
Blackout with you guys.
Yeah,
That was my first Stryper show, and then on after that, it was when you guys played the Club Nokia, and then I
yeah,
think you guys played Riverside for the To Hell with the Devil 30th anniversary show, and the
right.
Whiskey when you guys did the DVD. That was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean,
Uh,
throughout the 2000s, so when I got back in the band, or when the band restarted again, that would have been 2001, I think, 2000, somewhere in there. And me and Oz, we had put a band together called Sin Dizzy, and we had put out an album, an indie album, and it was doing okay. I mean, for what it was, and the type of sales I was doing, like online sales, when the internet was just kind of coming into be. And we had done some shows, and we did a show. They booked us for a show in Puerto Rico with Michael Sweet. So Michael Sweet was doing his solo stuff at the time, and Sin Dizzy was playing, and so at the very end of the night, we all got together and did some Stryper songs. So it was me and Oz and Michael minus Robert, and that just kind of sparked some interest again, within the industry, and then also, within us, between us. I mean, there was like, hey, let's go try doing some shows again, or let's do some recording. So we did. We got back together and we did some shows, and then we did we did some what do you call them, Stryper festivals. We did one on the East Coast, and then we did one in California, where people would get together, all the Stryper fans, and we'd like sign stuff and talk, do conferences and stuff like that. It was kind of a cool thing. So from there, just, the band Michael was getting kind of excited again about doing the band. And so we kind of put the band together in 2001, and we did a tour. I think it was 2001, 7 weeks live in America was an album that came out of that. And it may have been a little bit later than that. At any rate, I kind of was getting disillusioned after that. We were doing stuff. It wasn't fun anymore. Like I said, I wanted to remember the band as it was when we were doing arenas, and all of a sudden we're playing these little clubs and bars, really like biker bars, and we're like we're sleeping, the whole band, in one hotel room. So everybody's sharing beds, and the road crew guys are laying on the floor. It just wasn't a glamorous way to live. And, especially when I think I was in my 50s or late 40s at that point. It was just like, I did all this, it was fun when my parents were supporting me now, but it wasn't so much fun, in my older age. So I decided I was done, and that was in 2004, and I left the band for about 5 years, and they continued on, and they did, I think they did a couple albums.
Mhm.
Murder by Pride and Reborn were done, while I was out of the band. But then they were also releasing, like, DVDs, like they did the Live in, Puerto Rico DVD, and, there was a Rock Regime Demos album that came out. So all the stuff that I was still part of that I had played on. Um, and it came about when 2009, Michael's wife was really sick, and then she had passed away. And I went up to the funeral. I flew up to Boston, and just paid my respects. And from there, it was like, well, we're going to do this. He phoned me up not too long after that, and said we were going to do this tour, with Tracy, who was the bass player who replaced me, Tracy Ferry. And then the idea was for him to play all the new stuff, and then I would come in and play some songs, the old songs, so we'd all be out on the road together in that sense. And then when was that? 2009. We did that tour. Tracy decided he didn't want to be on that tour, I guess. And I don't know, some stuff may have gone down between him and the guys, but I continued on. I played the full set, and from there it was just like, okay, we're recording more albums. And it was like, so I'm back in the band again, and we just continued on until 2016. So we did probably, in my opinion, some of our better work in those last years that I was in the band than the previous albums, which were, I think, of the older albums, my favorite is still Against the Law. And that kind of brought everything to a close, in the 80s. And then we did, oh boy, see what happens when you get old, your brain you can't remember the names of these albums. So I guess that's a good thing. I did so many albums, I can't remember the names. But at any rate, we did some great albums, towards the end before I had left the band again. So, and they're still going strong today.
Go ahead, Brett.
Do you think it was the experience of having played so much and, gaining more as a musician, whether you gain more influence over time that made those later albums better? Or was it new technology as well, new gear, new
Yeah. Well,
mindset?
yeah, kind of all of the above. I mean, by the mid 2000s or mid 2010s and up, I had been playing for a long time. I've had a lot of experience by that point. Whereas the early stuff, I was still green. I had, I'd done recordings, but I never really got a sound in the studio. I never knew what I was looking for. I was just like expected to go in and plug in your instrument and start playing. And, if you didn't get it all in the first or second take, you're fired. Yeah. No, it's like, there wasn't that thought process where, we got to get the best bass tone. And certainly it didn't come from me. I was just all excited about playing and being in the studio, but I didn't really know the first thing about recording at that point. So through the years, and then having my own studio at home, and just trial and error, you kind of figure out that, the things that worked for all the years in the 60s and 70s was a P bass and a B15 amp, is what works in the studio. And so, I went back to playing P basses in the studio, and working on my tone. I think during To Hell with the Devil was like, that was a big wake up call, because I didn't play on the album. And so I was like starting to work on my tone, and just not tone like with your amp, but tone with your fingers, because a lot of it comes out of a lot of your tone is coming right out of your hands. And so, you're working with right and left hand technique and whatnot. At any rate, I was ready for the studio, and like I said, I'd done a ton of recordings since the early days, and I still continue to this day. Um, you just know what works. And like I said, when Pro Tools and like computer digital recording came out, home studios like sprang up everywhere. And so of course I jumped on that bandwagon, and I was like, I had my own home studio, and I was doing stuff online, which was great because that was a great way for me to supplement my income. And of course, everything that came through, all the work I got, was all heavy metal bands from Europe or South America. It was like all this hardcore thrash stuff that I ended up playing on. I'm like, give me some Motown, something. Give me something that has a groove. But at any rate, I still do that to this day, and that's I have my studio set up, and that's the beauty of the internet now. Where I've done stuff with guys in Europe, and one of the guys in Europe, like another guy's up in Oregon, and guys in California, and I'm in Nashville, or now I live in Phoenix. But we're all in separate parts of the world or the country, and we're making records online in that sense, where we file sharing. You can send a big file and record it digitally and send it off to the next guy, and they add their part. So a lot of people make recordings that way. And, that's, like I said, that's a way that I still supplement my income to this day. I still do a lot of work. Like for instance, with Aldo, I did a lot of stuff with Aldo, over the last 3 years. Just everything was done online. And some of that ends up on recordings and on albums, I should say, and then other stuff gets trashed. But that's the way people work in this day and age.
I want to talk about well, you occasionally also sub for our friend Kenny, who's in Kenny Metcalf as Elton
Oh yeah,
John occasionally,
yeah.
and also I wanted to ask, what's a song that's out there that you wish you could have written?
I wish I could have written. Well, let me talk about Kenny first, because I was like I said earlier, I was a huge Elton fan, so I knew all the bass parts for the early Elton John stuff, and Kenny is probably one of the best Elton impersonators that's out there. And so he asked, their regular guy couldn't make a few shows or something, and they had asked me to come on board and play bass, and for these little short stints that they were doing. And I ended up coming back and doing them again. So we had several little tours or whatever you want to call them, that I got to impersonate Dee Murray as the bass player. And it was fun. It was great, and I loved doing it. Song that I wish I could have written, boy, something that has made a lot of money. I don't know, any Beatles song, or maybe any Michael Jackson song for that matter, that's made millions of dollars. Who wants to be that guy who has that hit song that just carries you on till the end of your life, and you provide for your family, and your grandkids and so on and so forth. It's like, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but that would be awesome to be able to write one of those songs that everybody knows, and that just lives on forever in that sense.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Britt.
And to follow that up, as Stryper was an MTV band, and speaking of trying to make money off the song, were there any opportunities that Stryper was presented with while you were in the band for a sync, whether a TV show, a commercial, a theme song, or anything like that? Any opportunities that came your way where Stryper was able to be played in the background or something?
Well, excuse me. So yeah, there's several that come to mind. I can't remember the name of the one movie where there's our Stryper sticker on a cash register, and the guy's singing, not singing, but mouthing the words to one of our songs. There was a movie. Oh boy, what
Airheads?
not Airheads. It was the girls skaters.
Girls
What's it
Skate.
called?
I have to
It's
look
gonna
that
come
up.
to me after we're done. It's gonna. We played. Oh gosh, we played. The band actually played a sub part in the movie with our T-shirt.
Was it an old movie?
It's probably the early 2000s, maybe 2010. It's gonna whip it, whip. Um,
Whiplash?
Whiplash. It's about why can't I think of Ellen Page was in the movie. She was like the main character.
Oh,
It'll be
hold on.
oh my
Maybe
gosh.
I go to her Ellen Page. So
Ellen, let's see. Hang on.
let me 07?
07 maybe?
Let me go to the
Whiplash
IMDb
or whip. Why can't I remember?
somewhere around there.
Whip
It's still crazy that the
movie.
band had a sub part in the movie as well. And that I don't remember this movie offhand myself. I'm not
It's called Whip It.
much of a movie person out. Whip It.
Yeah, it came out in 2009.
Okay.
Drew Barrymore, I think it was her movie as I think she directed it as a matter of fact, but
Oh yeah, she was the director.
yeah, so at any rate, if you watch the movie, Stryper's shirt or To Hell with the Devil shirt is like a subplot in the movie. Everything's based around this T-shirt that this girl, Ellen Page, she wore this shirt that belonged to her mom, who was an 80s hairband fan, and Stryper was her mom's favorite band. So anyways, Ellen Page's character wears this shirt, and the shirt gets stolen by this guy she falls in love with. Anyways, it's a great movie, and that's just a subplot to the movie. There's a bunch of other. Early on, you asked about commercials and stuff, and that was we all went to Hollywood one day and auditioned. Somebody told us about this audition. They needed somebody for a shampoo commercial or something, and because of course we had all the big hair, so we all went there, and they needed a band. I can't remember what ever became of it, but of course we didn't get the audition. So anyway, yeah, so that was we did all go down one day and audition at some TV station or something. I can't remember where it was, but we did that, which would have been funny.
All right. Well, we're gonna about wrap this up. Anything else you like to add, Brew Bread and Tim?
No, this
Go
has
ahead.
been incredible. Thank you for all your stories.
Awesome, dude. Yeah, man, I enjoy talking about it now. I've had an incredible life and an incredible career, and I'm still out there even in my 60s doing stuff. And I don't know if I'll ever get back on the road again, but you never know. At this point, I'm out there still playing, just not like it was. Appreciate you guys allowing me to come out here and
Thank
do
you
an
for
interview with you, and it's been awesome.
thank you for coming on.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate. We both really appreciate you, and it's fun. Where can everybody find you?
Right now I'm just, look on Facebook. I'm, Timothy Gaines. I've got 2 pages, a personal one and a fan page. And I think the fan page has got like 35,000 people on there following. So probably not too hard to find, but, yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at right now.
All right, sounds good. I want to
Awesome.
thank Timothy Gaines for his time. It was an absolute pleasure for him to be on here, and
Thank you again.
being
Thank you.
a
Thank you.
huge Striper fan. This is awesome, and want to thank you again. For myself, Brutal Brett, and Tim, this has been an episode of Fun Never Ends Podcast. I will put the links for Timothy's social medias in the link in the description. Go find Fun Never Ends Podcast anywhere you find it. Go to
Awesome.
funneverendspodcast.com. Thank you, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
All right, guys. Thanks. God bless.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.